How was the homework? Mostly good? Good. I know from the questions people were asking, it seemed like you were getting pretty far through it, so that's good. Um, everybody push up what you did to GitHub? No. Why not? All right. So many excuses, man. I'm just kidding. So, but do get in the habit of pushing to GitHub. As you found out on Friday, Davey and I, while you guys are doing other stuff, use that opportunity to kind of check in on your repos and see how things are going. So make sure you're getting those commits pushed up, particularly by Friday. It's much easier if you do it as you go along, but definitely by Friday, make sure to do that because we do assessments of both quantity and quality of work, and that does get forwarded to Fran and Nicole. So just so you're aware. All right, so let's go over homework solutions. So when we left off, we had just componentized the header, right? So let's look at that. So are there any other pieces in here that you think might be worth componentizing? Nav links, that's probably a good idea. So you didn't have to do this. And again, don't feel like if you did the homework solutions differently than I did, that's in any way bad. I mean, you could have people that both had like 10 years of experience and they would still probably do things slightly different ways. So we're just going to go over a way to do the componentization of this page, but it does not have to be your way. So first thing we're going to do, if we're going to componentize the nav links, is make a new file. We'll just call it navlinks.js. Do our import of React and component. And then make a new navlinks class. And what method do I need to have? Render. You guys are getting so good at React already. And like usual, we'll just do a quick sanity check to make sure that we have wired up our components correctly. What else do I need to do in this file? Export it, yeah, because we got to use it somewhere else. So we got that, and then where do I need to import it? In app? In header, right? Because that's the one that's actually going to call the component. And give it a relative path y. Why do we do a relative path instead of just saying navlinks? So we use /navlinks instead of just navlinks. Where's it going to look if I just say navlinks? In the node modules, right? So it's not in node modules, so we got to tell it the relative path to it. So if we have done this correctly, and I think I have my server running, we should see. Oh, there it is. That looks kind of cool. Maybe we should keep it that way. So we know our component's wired up correctly, so now we can move the markup over there, right? So instead of that, we'll just put that div in there. And then now it's looking the way that it should. Now we can also move the CSS over there, the ones that specifically pertain to the nav links, which it looks like are just these two, right? So we can cut that, make a new file, navlinks.css, paste it in, and then what do I need to do so it actually knows about it? Import it into the component, right? Make sure that still works. Yep, looks the way it should. Cool. Now, what do you notice about this markup here? Anything in particular? The href? What about it? Yeah, that was just because this isn't actually a real page, so I just put in a pound sign. That's pretty a common placeholder if you don't actually have a link yet. We could make it an href, but this isn't a fully functional app, so it won't actually go anywhere. More what I'm getting at is just the fact that we kind of repeat the same thing 3 times. So that a lot of times that's a good opportunity to just do like a map. So, and we'll do this again for the links at the bottom of the page, but this is just so we can kind of get the hang of it. So, what information do I actually need to be able to render these correctly? Like, what's different about them? Yeah.
Like the text that's inside the
Yeah, as of right now, the only difference is the text. So if I have an array of those 3 different strings, then we could just map over that and make the 3 different links, right? That should work. So let's say in header, and again, this type of stuff is stuff that you would normally in a fully functional app, this would probably come from your backend, but we don't have a backend actually hooked up to this, so we're just going to hard code it. So we can just say, and our 3 things are what? They're home, about, and login, right? So, I think I had it separated. Doesn't really matter. And then how do I get those into navlinks? How do we pass something into a component? Props, which just get, they look like attributes on the component, right? So I can just say, give it the curly braces so it knows it's JavaScript. So I can just say links equals links, right? So remember, this is what we're gonna, the name of what it's gonna be inside the component, and this is what I'm actually passing in. So this links corresponds to this, that's what I'm passing in, and then this is what it's gonna be called inside the component. I could call this something else, and it would still work fine, but then I would have to use whatever name I called it when we're inside the component. So if we do that, we already know we're going to have to, if we do this, then we're going to map over this array to make our links, right? So there's a lot of ways you could do that. The way that I'm going to do it right now is just inside the render method. I'm just going to take this .props.links, right? Because that's what we passed it in as. And then map over it. And then basically we're just going to take what that's going to return is one of these. But instead of this, what do I put? Curly bracket, good idea. And then it's just link, right? Because each item in this array is just a string. That's the name that I want. And then once I have that, I can replace all these and just say links. So basically, I'm establishing a context for a JavaScript expression, and I'm literally just going to render this, which is taking each of the items in the links array and making an A tag for it with that string as the inside. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for speaking up. Is that better? Okay. So if that all worked, we should see the exact same thing, and we can inspect those. And make that a little bit bigger. Pretty much, those look exactly the way they did before. So, mission accomplished. So we can commit that real quick. We'll deal with that in a minute. All right, so now we've got our header pretty much done. I mean, we could break things out. I mean, you could go super atomic and make like this its own component, but really in terms of functionality, that's all kind of just presentation, so there's not really necessarily a need to do that. So let's go ahead and move on to the next part. So when I was going through here, I sort of thought of it as like 3 base components. I've got my header, I've got my main content, and then I just got my footer at the bottom, right? So that's how I split it up. Again, you do not have to split it up the exact same way, but it's a way you can split it up. So we've got our header. Let's go ahead and make a main content. And basically I'm going to put, so this whole thing that's main tag, so all of that down to here, I'm going to break out into this main content one. Step 1, import. Everywhere you want to use React, you got to import it. Okay. And before I forget, we'll go ahead and export it. Do our render method. And do a quick sanity check. My autocomplete's not working. And to import it over here. Actually, I'll do it right below the header. Let's see if we did that right. Oh, sweet. So we got that wired up correctly. Go ahead and move all of this stuff over. All the way down to main. And then you can see our main app is starting to get pretty small, which is great, because then it's easy to sort of see the breakdown of it. And there we go. All our content is now in a separate component. Now looking at our main content, how do you propose that we would break that up? So main content is everything from here down to these 3, or these links. What would be a good split of those? Yeah.
The main article and then that thing on the side.
Main article and then the ad. Yep. And then our last one would just be this part, right? So it's kind of easy to see. One thing you can do is, if you're trying to think about how to break something up into components, you can do a CSS rule to give everything like a border, and then you can actually see the boxes that make up a page, and a lot of times that can give you some good ideas about how things are grouped together and how to break them up. But this, like, they kind of use different background colors anyway, so you can kind of almost see the boxes that we're dealing with. So that's generally a good place to start if you're not sure exactly how to split it up. So let's do the article first. And the article should be, you can see I gave it a nice class name of article. So that's going to be this div down to here, right? The nice thing is once you're more used to this is just practice of breaking up an existing page, which you may have to do at some point, into components. But normally once you're getting more comfortable with React, you'll actually think about it ahead of time and just make the components right off the bat. You can always change it, but you can kind of think of where your functionality is and build them that way from the ground up. In the meantime, it's good practice to do a bunch of them. Then I do my export. import it here yet. Oh, can anybody think of what I forgot to do on the article or on the main content? What did we not move over? Styles, yeah. So they're still part of the main app CSS. So let's go ahead and do that. So everything for the main part. So the avatar is part of that. Article links. The aside is part of that. The add, other articles. Basically everything down to the footer. And then I'm going to need to import it, right? All right, let's see if that works. Cool. So you can see it is rendering the article. So got that wired up correctly, meaning now we can go ahead and move all this markup over there. So that is everything before the add, right? Let's see. There it is. Should probably close some of those soon. Oh, now I've got 2 copies of it. Did I not cut it from the other one, or didn't save the other one? Yeah. So I removed it from here, but I didn't save it, so it's still rendering both. So I got 2 copies of the same article. If I save that, there we go. Cool. Back to the way it was. Oh, I almost forgot. See this error over here? Did you guys run into this when you... Who wants to read this out loud for the class? Ian, you want to do that for us?
Each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key prop. Check the render method of nav links. See that link for more information.
And then read this part too. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Yeah, if you could read me a stack trace, that'd be great. So, clearly it's talking about nav links. Sorry, we should have caught this earlier. Now we got to go back to nav links to talk about it. But basically, anytime that you are mapping over something, so it's producing multiple, basically just iterating over an array to create components, it wants a key property for that. And the reason is when it is keeping track of what to re-render, it needs to have a unique identifier for each thing so that it can internally keep track of those. Otherwise, it's got to kind of refresh the whole list, even if not the whole list changed. If you give it a key, if you don't give it a key, it won't break the application, obviously, because it's still going. It'll just give you a warning. But it does make React much more efficient to give it a key and to make the warning go away, so you don't have that anymore. So let's take a pause from what we were doing and go do that real quick. So back over to nav links, not the CSS, the actual component. I think, there we go. So what that's saying is on each item that I'm producing when I iterate over the array, I need to add a key prop. And then we need to put something in here that's going to be unique for each one. Can anybody think of something that we could put in there? Index? Yep. So in map, we were only using the first argument, which was the link itself, but we could easily have it also give us the index. And so if we just put that index in there as the key, then each one's going to have a unique one, right? Because you can only have one item per index in an array. So that's going to be unique for each one. And that should, yeah, now we don't see that warning anymore. Make sense? Cool. So a lot of times, again, kind of going back to like we don't actually have a backend for this application. So we're just kind of making stuff up. A lot of times you won't use just the array index. You'll be getting information from your backend server. And as a general rule, stuff that you get out of a database or that's provided to you by a backend server will already have a unique ID assigned to it. So usually it would just be something like key equals link.id, right? So it's just whatever it's passing into us. So you don't generally have to just use a array index. A lot of times what you'll get provided from the backend server will already have a unique ID for it. So you just use that. All right, now back to what we were doing. So we moved the article over. That's all good. Still looks the same. All good. We should probably do another commit. I did a couple things there. Make main content. I guess one more thing we should do before we commit that. Let's make the article CSS. And that's going to be, so the article is part of that. The avatar is author info. Everything down to the aside, right? And then we'll need to import that into article. Make sure that still works. Sure does. Cool. So what's the next component we should do? We just did our main article. The add? Yeah, let's do that. All right, we'll go ahead and close article since we're done with that for now. And header. We don't need that. All right. New file. You feel like after doing this homework, you got a pretty good grasp of making components? Good. That was really my goal. We were kind of debating on how to start with React, and I was like, you know, honestly, we should probably just have them make a bunch of components that don't have a lot of functionality first, because once you get kind of used to thinking in that way, then all the other things sort of get easier. All right, and then add is going to go in main content, right? Make sure that works. Cool, there it is. Let's move the markup over. Looks like it works just fine. Let's move the styles over. That's going to be all of this stuff down to other article. And last but not least, import that in there. Don't worry, we're almost to more fun stuff. Failed to compile. Oh. I did the wrong thing. You don't do that for CSS, you just import it. There we go. Awesome. So now everything is components all the way down to here. So we're getting close to being done. Next step. Let's commit that real quick. Oh, I didn't. I never did that commit. Main content, article. All right. So next thing let's do. Let's get these other article links. So that's going to be this whole part, right? And it's up to you what you want to call your components. I'd try to do something descriptive, even if it is a little long. So I just called it other article links. But not caps lock. Who all got the map working for the articles? Nice. How'd you do it? How'd you get the information into them? Yes, Steve?
Just using an array of objects and using map on that.
Yeah, excellent. So very similar to how we did in Mega Roster, the student list. Like that was an array of objects, right? And I had the student's name and what else did I have in there? Whether they were promoted or not. You know, so we can kind of do that same thing. We can look at what unique properties we would need to know to make those individual links and then just make objects that reflect that. So let's figure out how to do that. And we just need to import over here. What are you doing down there? There we go. Cool. Got that in there to show up. So now we can move the markup over. And now our main content looks nice and tidy. I like that. Cool, looks the same. Oops. Do the styles. So if I do this, what's left in our main content style sheet? Nothing. So we don't actually need it. So that's cool. And sometimes that definitely ends up happening. You end up with what we call like container components essentially, that essentially just make calls to render other things. So it may not have any styles of its own, and that's perfectly fine. But if you don't need it, might as well delete it. And then we'll need to no longer import it, because otherwise it'll yell at us. And there, everything looks exactly the same, even though we no longer have a main content CSS. But now all of the styles are specific to the components that are actually affected by them. So that's really kind of what you're looking for, is if I need to change any styling of a particular thing, I know exactly where to look for that style sheet and where those styles are going to be. All right. So let's think about these links. What things are unique about them? So like if I'm making an object that gives me all the unique information for this first link, what properties would it need to have? Yeah. So the things that are unique about this one, again, since we're not doing actual like link for it, that would be a third one if we were actually doing that, if this was a real page. But for right now, what we have different, the image source is different. And then basically what the, I guess we'll call it like title of the link. So, oh, you're right. Yeah, we can do the alt. Good point. So 3 things. So let's make, let's call it, it's going to be an array, right? And in that array, we're just going to have 4 objects because we have 4 links. First one, we'll call it image URL. It's just going to be this string, right? And then we need the title. Which is also a string, so don't forget to do that. And alt. Okay, come on. Make sense? All right, so we just need to do that for a few more. Let's see here. Next one. So again, this is generally stuff that you would get from your back end, but we don't have one, so just so we understand how to do it, we're just going to hard code this stuff. Anybody know why I'm getting this? Yeah, so I've got single quotes in a single quoted string. So I can either escape those, or probably the easier option is just use double quotes on the outside. So once we have this, what is our next step? Anybody? Got an array of objects. What are we going to do with it to render that? Map it. So very similar to what we did for the nav links at the top. We can just map over it and put the correct properties in the correct spot so it looks right. So we can do, let's see, how did I do this? So the easiest way to do it is probably let's just do article links.map, right? But first we need to use the curly braces, right? And then what that needs to return for each one is what? Each div, right. So let's copy one of them in here. One more. Get our indentation correct here. So if I've got a link and I've got those properties on it, what do I put in as the image source? So source would be curly brace link dot what? What are our properties? Mm-hmm. What was your question about that? Oh, yeah. I mean, that would still work. It might be a little bit confusing, but and then our alt, what do we put here? Curly brace link dot alt. Nice. And then here. Cool. Let's see if that works. And there we go. We got 2 copies of them now. So I can just get rid of these. Yes, good point. So yeah, you'll notice. Oh, I accidentally took off the bottom div. There we go. So there we go. We got 1 copy now, but I am getting that problem of each one needs a key prop, right? Because we did not add a key to it. So it just needs to go on whatever the outer element is. So we can do the same thing that we did earlier and pass it both the link and the index. And that should make that go away. Cool. There we go. Now, one thing you can do, we haven't gone over this yet. Has anybody heard of functional stateless components? Probably not, since this is your second day of React. So if you have a component that does not have any need for state, doesn't need really any other functions, it really is just a purely presentational component. It doesn't actually have to be a full class. It can just be a function. So this is a good candidate for that because literally all it's doing is just we're using it to render these things, but they aren't anything other than just presentational links, right? They don't have any functionality, click handlers, state, anything like that. So just so you can kind of see what that looks like, we'll do that real quick. So if I were to make this, we could just say function article link. And rather than, it's not going to inherit from component or anything like that. It's just a standalone function. and just make sure it receives its props. And all it really has is a return. So we can move this markup out to here. And instead of doing that, now we can just one line it and just say, now we're still going to need to pass it the stuff that it needs. So if I've got the key out here, I'm still going to need to pass in the actual link, right? Because we still need that information. Don't need that key there because it's now on the outside part. And so this gets passed in as props. So now link will be props.link. So when it's a full class component, it's going to be this.props because it actually has properties on the component itself. When it's just a functional stateless component, it's just a function, and those props are getting directly passed in as an argument, so it's just props. Does that kind of make sense? It's like we don't have to go through the whole making a class, extending component. Like if we have a piece of the markup that is just purely presentational, you can make a functional stateless component for it. And so there's just a lot less overhead with that. And the should, yeah, still works fine. And then it makes our map much smaller and easier to read because it's just saying, you know, give me an article link for each item in that article links array. Make sense? Cool. I'm going to skip doing the footer because that's really boring. We've already done that. I don't think you have any problems at this point figuring out how to move this footer into its own component. Does anybody want me to go over that? Okay. Let's do the harder stuff. Did anybody make the comments box show up? Yeah, good. How'd you do that?
I just had a variable in state that checked if the button was clicked or not. And if the button was clicked, you showed that component and that didn't show anything.
Perfect, yeah. So basically, this is the first time we've needed to use state because we need to know the state of something, like should we show this thing or not. So we need to keep track of that somewhere. What component out of the ones that I have do you think that should be part of? Article? Yeah, because I mean those links are in the bottom of article, right? And so it's probably going to show up, the comments are going to be related to that article, right? So it makes sense to have those be inside that component. Again, a lot of ways you could do it, but that makes sense to me, so let's do it that way. So let's go into article.js. And this is our link that's going to turn it on and off, right? Our comments link. So if something needs to happen when I click on that button, how do we get it to do that? How do we get JavaScript to do anything when we click on something? Mumble, mumble, can't hear it. What? I know you guys probably have it. What is it? Event listener, right? So it needs to know when a click event happens. So in React, we can just say on click. And then inside the curly braces, we can just tell it what function we want it to call. So basically, we could have it just when you click it, it shows it. I think it would probably be better for us to be able to toggle it on and off, right? So if I click it once, it shows me the comments. If I click it again, it goes away. So let's just call it toggle comments. So a couple of things we're going to need. It's not just a pure render anymore. We said we need some state on this, right? Because we have to know whether that value is true or false that we're toggling. And if I'm using state, where do I initialize that? In the